10 Pinkbike points for whoever could come up with the best acronym for what BMC stands for. Sarah, do you know what it actually stands for? They're not very creative over there.
Bike Manufacturing Company. We thought it would be something a little more exciting. So if you have something more exciting than that, let us know. They'll probably change it based on Pinkbike comments.
I don't think that's what they're going to do.
Hey everyone, my name's Sarah Moore and we're here on the Sunshine Coast for another Value Bikes field trip review. With me here is BMC's Twostroke Aluminum, which retails for $1,600. We're testing it in the hardtail category. BMC has had some of the fastest cross-country racers on their bikes in years past, including two-time Olympic gold medalist Julien Absalon, and now they just signed current world champion Pauline Ferrand-Prévot. So we were pretty excited to see how this racy hardtail stacked up against the rest of the value bikes. This bike looks fast just standing still. BMC says it's for setting personal records on uphills and for tearing around your local cross-country track. Frame details include internal cable routing, which contributes to that sleek look, and there's also a threaded bottom bracket. It comes in sizes small through extra large, all with 29-inch wheels. None of those bikes come with dropper posts, which does save costs, but it's also not uncommon for a cross-country bike not to come with a dropper post. Some of those $10,000 bikes, the Trek Super Caliber, the Cannondale Scalpel that I tested in the cross-country field test, also didn't come with dropper posts. This bike comes with that slam stem and no headset spacers, which will definitely appeal to that cross-country racer. You're not going to be doing any bar spins with this bike. For one, it's a cross-country bike. For two, there's an integrated fork stopper, which means that your handlebars are not going to spin further than 90 degrees. Let's move on to geometry. With a 67-degree head tube angle and a 75-degree seat tube angle, it might not sound that aggressive if we're comparing it to the other trail bikes in this category. But if we look at the cross-country bikes that we had at the last field test, it's actually half a degree slacker than that Specialized Epic that we said was the most modern geometry of them all. There are two aluminum versions of the Twostroke, with prices starting at $1,200. If you want a carbon version, there are 4 to choose from, with prices starting at $2,200 US. Our test bike here is the BMC Twostroke AL One. It comes with a RockShox Recon 100mm fork with a bar-mounted lockout. It has a SRAM NX SX mixed drivetrain, Shimano Dior brakes, and Vittoria Barzo tires in a 2.25 width. It retails for $1,600 US and weighs in at 27 pounds 12 ounces. That's enough for the details. Let's get into what you really want to know, how it rides out on the trails.
Before you hit the trails, what do you got to do to this bike?
So you set up the RockShox fork according to the numbers in their Trailhead app, so handy app they've got you can use there. And then we set up the tires with 21, 23 PSI, just like we did on all the other bikes.
I do have one question though. So that BMC here, it arrived with the stem absolutely slammed and no headset spacers. So if you wanted the handlebars higher, you...
Don't have any options, just do your yoga if you want to ride this bike.
Oh boy. All right, Sarah, so BMC bills this thing as an entry-level cross-country hardtail. So obviously it's got to be good on the climbs. I mean, it looks fast just sitting there. What's the deal?
Yeah, it definitely looks like the fastest bike of all the hardtails, I would say. And, you know, it's not just looks. It actually climbs really well. And, you know, it seems silly to say, but it's the most efficient of the hardtails on the climb.
I don't think that's silly, though. So obviously it doesn't have rear suspension, so it's going to feel quick that way. But the position that it puts you in, I think that's what you're more referring to. The position that it puts you in sort of encourages you to pedal hard.
Yeah, it just
I was behind her, so I know this.
Yeah, so when you're in that kind of just low position, that long stem, it really just, you want to push on the pedals, you know? And it makes easy work of, you know, smooth gravel climbs, it makes easy work of, you know, twisty or single track. And even with that long stem, the steering is, you know, still precise, and it just wants to climb, you know? It makes climbing an enjoyable thing to do.
So Sarah, you've been jumping back and forth between that BMC and that Vitus. They're very different bikes made for very different things, to be fair, but tell me how the two ride on the single track when it gets a little tighter and a little slower.
Yeah, I mean, you might look at them and be like, you know, hardtailed is one, how can one feel better than the other one? And it's that geometry on that BMC is just more aggressive, and it just, you want to push on the pedals when you're on that bike. And it's funny when you switch back and forth between the Vitus and the BMC, the Vitus feels so upright. Like I was joking when we were riding it, like it feels like I'm on a hybrid suddenly.
Your adjustable stem was up too high.
Yeah, I had to lower the stem,
Lower it down a little bit.
So yeah, that's a more traditional kind of feeling bike, whereas the BMC just feels definitely a lot more aggressive.
All right, so the BMC is obviously a cross-country focused hardtail. Cross-country races still go down the hills, and cross-country races can still be won or lost on the descents, for sure. So what is the BMC like on the way back down?
It's a more traditional feeling bike, even if it does have, pretty progressive cross-country numbers. Yeah.
It's a 67 degree head angle on the front of that thing. I mean, I've ridden a lot of older cross-country bikes that were just like downright scary.
Yeah, well, even that Canyon Lux that we were riding, it had a 70 degree head tube angle. So that's like a significant difference, and it's great to see that on a value-oriented bike.
Yeah, so I think what we're trying to say here is that, obviously the Growler is more capable on the descents.
Yeah,
the
but it's not even a
Vitus,
fair comparison.
It's not apples to apples comparison.
Yeah, so handling-wise, this bike, if it had a dropper post on it, it would be a really confident descender for a cross-country bike.
But it sounds like what you're saying is that if this thing had a dropper post, it's not the geometry that's holding the BMC back on the descents, is it? Which, if we're talking cross-country bikes, I mean, that's a notable thing, right?
Yeah, and it's definitely going to be more tiring than those full suspension bikes that we were testing on the downhills. And you've got to choose your lines more carefully. If you're on a hardtail, you're more likely to be, kicked offline. But for what it is.
Speak for yourself, Sarah. I wasn't having that problem on the Growler, everybody. But if we're just talking cross-country bikes, I mean, it's a capable descender for what it is, rear suspension or not.
Yeah.
Okay, Sarah, let's wrap up the descending section with the BMC. And remembering this thing is an entry-level cross-country race bike, what are your final thoughts about this thing?
You know what? If you're coming from an older cross-country bike and you upgrade to this thing, it's going to be a significant difference. Like, it is definitely a cross-country bike that handles really well on the descents. And it's not, fair to compare it to a Rocky Mountain Growler or that kind of thing. It's a lot more efficient on the climbs, and that's what you're going to get on the downhills.
Okay, let's move on to components, and let's start with the stuff you like first, Sarah.
I really like that RockShox Recon fork, 100 millimeters of travel, but it works really well. And it also has a bar-mounted lockout.
Everybody out there right now is saying, lockout on the handlebar, you don't need that, but...
For the intended use, I think it makes sense that you would want to be at a cross-country race and lock out your fork. You want to be efficient.
Right, exactly. So what are some other things about this bike, component-wise, that make sense?
I think those tires make sense. It's fast rolling. You definitely feel that on the climbs. You don't need a wider tire on this kind of bike.
Okay, let's talk about the stuff that you didn't like now, component-wise. What was it?
It's got a mix of SX and NX, which it works well, but it's not as good as that Dior 12-speed. And the ergonomics of how the shifter works is just not as easy when it's paired with those Shimano brakes.
Yeah, that's the thing here. That shifter, it's right up against a Shimano brake, and it is kind of hard to reach, isn't it? Yeah. And that's something that I remember from the last value field trip that we did. Ergonomics, I mean, if you're buying an entry-level bike, you're not getting any. So it's a little bit hard to compare the BMC to the other hardtails because it's not exactly apples to apples, is it, Sarah?
No.
The BMC has very different intentions than those other bikes, but that said, it's still the second most expensive hardtail of the bunch, and it doesn't come with a dropper post, so...
Yeah, it doesn't come with a dropper post, so if you're gonna add one of those, that'll be at least $200. And then the other thing that, if we compare it to the other bikes, it has that SX NX drivetrain, which doesn't have as good ergonomics and doesn't have as good shifting compared to some of those other bikes that come with 11 or 12-speed DR drivetrains.
Yeah, it works, it does the job, and there's no reason to change it if it's working just fine. But, I mean, there's no arguing that stuff doesn't feel nearly as refined, especially when you're shifting under power, which, I mean, it's an entry-level cross-country race bike, so...
You're probably shifting.
Right, under power. Exactly, yeah.
I think this is a great entry-level cross-country bike for somebody who's just getting into racing. It's going to be a good choice, not too expensive, and you can kind of get that good geometry without breaking the bank.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest plus to this thing is that it uses pretty progressive cross-country focused geometry. And I know these numbers, they don't look, that great on paper, but for a cross-country race bike, it's definitely on the more progressive side. So for the price of the bike, you're getting definitely some forward-thinking geometry.
Mm-hmm. And the other pro is just like how amazing it feels on the climb. It's, super efficient, progressive position,
Bye,
fast
Sarah.
rolling tires.
I'll see you at the top.
Yeah,
You just wait for me up there.
But if we get into the cons, that feel on the descents, it's not going to be as, you're not going to be going as fast on the descents compared to another trail bike.
That's a given, though.
Yeah, it's still a con, though.
It's still a con, for sure, but I think a lot of the bike's potential could be unlocked if you just put the damn dropper post on the bike.
Definitely, if you want to go fast on the descents, you'll want to upgrade to a dropper post.
Yeah. The other thing we should probably mention, Sarah, well, this frame has a lot of really neat features. I think it's the best looking bike here. It doesn't come with much in the way of frame protection, so you'll need to add some yourself. Okay, it's time to wrap it up here with this BMC, Sarah. What did you think? What are your closing thoughts about this thing?
Well, BMC touts this bike as being a bike that you're going to want to go chase some uphill records on, go to your local cross-country races, and I'd say they're spot on. That's exactly what I would, recommend this bike to a friend if they were wanting to get into cross-country racing without breaking the bank. And it has good geometry numbers. Just add that dropper post and you can ride any cross-country race and get to the top really fast with that bar-mounted lockout.
So it sounds like for $1,600, it's a pretty decent entry-level cross-country race bike. All right, so that is it for the BMC Twostroke AL One. Stay tuned for way more videos and roundtable discussions where we're gonna talk about how these bikes performed and compare them even more. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.